High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon. The deafening rumble of the city vanished, replaced by an unsettling, dead silence. One moment, 16-year-old Ange was walking home from his high school campus. The next, the concrete beneath his feet turned into weathered rooftop gravel. Ange blinked against the harsh sunlight. He wore his standard second-year high school uniform, but the environment around him was completely alien. Infinite skyscrapers stretched into the horizon, connected only by precariously swaying suspension bridges. There was no ground in sight, just a thick, ominous layer of clouds far below. What is this place? Ange muttered, his martial arts training instantly kicking in. His heart rate spiked, but he forced his breathing into a controlled, rhythmic pattern to maintain focus. Years of discipline had taught him to analyze his surroundings before panicking. His eyes scanned the immediate area. Just 2 steps away, resting on an industrial metal crate, lay a sleek, black tactical pistol. Ange approached carefully. He checked the perimeter, then picked up the weapon. He dropped the magazine, verified it was fully loaded, and racked the slide with practiced ease. On the side of the crate sat a rigid tactical holster equipped with a belt attachment. Working quickly, he secured the holster to his waist and smoothly clicked the tactical pistol into place. A sharp, clicking sound echoed from the rooftop doorway behind him. Ange spun around, his hands dropping into a defensive stance. Emerging from the shadows was a figure wearing a spotless white tuxedo, a fedora, and a creepy, smiling plastic mask. In its hands, the masked figure gripped a blood-stained chef's knife. The sniper mask and Yuri Honjo had survived their own trials, but in this sector of the high-rise world, a new game was beginning. Ange shifted his weight, ready to see if his martial arts could defy the rules of this endless nightmare. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. The smiling plastic mask glinted in the sunlight. The knife mask didn't speak. It just tilted its head, letting out a wet, raspy breath, and lunged forward with a wild, downward slash. Ange didn't flinch. Instead of reaching for his new tactical pistol, he relied on years of muscle memory. As the blade came down, he stepped inside the mask's guard, pivoting his torso to let the knife graze empty air. With lightning speed, Ange executed a textbook martial arts counter. He grabbed the mask's knife wrist with his left hand, locking the joint. He smashed his right elbow directly into the center of the plastic mask. The impact cracked the porcelain-like surface, sending the masked man stumbling backward toward the edge of the roof. There were no safety railings here, just a sheer drop into the abyss. The creature snarled, ignoring the pain due to its brainwashing, and charged again. Ange waited for the perfect moment. As the mask threw a desperate punch, Ange dropped low, grabbed the attacker's outstretched arm, and used the mask's own forward momentum against it. With a powerful judo shoulder throw, Ange flipped the attacker cleanly over his back. The mask sailed through the open air, clearing the edge of the skyscraper. It plummeted silently past the suspension bridges, disappearing completely into the thick blanket of clouds below. Ange walked to the ledge, his hand finally resting on the grip of his holstered pistol, and looked down into the endless void. Rule number 1 of this world, Ange whispered to himself, adjusting his school uniform jacket. Don't get close to the edge. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. A cold, heavy pressure suddenly filled the air. Ange's martial arts instinct screamed at him to move, every hair on his arm standing on end. Slow footsteps echoed from the rooftop staircase. Emerging from the shadows was a young man with sharp, calculating eyes, wearing a pristine white suit that contrasted sharply with the bleak skyline. It was Mamoru Aikawa, the powerful god candidate and the mastermind controlling numerous masks in this realm. Beside him stood his ultimate enforcer, the Great Angel Mask, a towering figure wielding a massive, blood-slick sword. Aikawa stopped a few paces away, looking at the empty ledge where the knife mask had just been thrown. A cruel, amused smile played on his lips. Impressive. You threw one of my guardian angels over the edge without even drawing that little toy on your hip. Ange subtly shifted his weight, his boots gripping the gravel. His hand hovered inches above his tactical holster. Who are you? Did you bring me here? I am the one rewriting the rules of this flawed world, Aikawa said, adjusting his collar. He looked at Ange's second-year high school uniform. You have exceptional physical talent, kid. But in this world, martial arts are nothing compared to the power of a god candidate. You either submit to my order, or you become another corpse on the pavement below. The great angel mask stepped forward, raising its colossal blade. The sheer killing intent radiating from the duo made the air feel thin. Ange closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep, controlled breath to calm his racing pulse. When he opened them, his gaze was locked onto Aikawa. He knew he couldn't win a head-on fight against both of them yet, but his training taught him never to back down from a predator. Ange unclipped the safety strap on his tactical holster. I don't take orders from people who hide behind masks. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. Ange didn't wait for the giant to strike. Exploding forward with fast-as-hell speed, he blurred across the gravel rooftop, catching the great angel mask completely off guard. Before the towering enforcer could swing its massive sword, Ange closed the distance and unleashed a brutal, lightning-fast 5-piece martial arts combo. 1-2, a blinding left jab followed by a crushing right cross directly into the center of the mask. 3-4, a fierce left hook to the ribs, followed immediately by a devastating spinning back elbow to the jaw. 5, a heavy, liver-shattering knee strike that doubled the giant over. As the dazed enforcer stumbled, Ange seized the giant's massive arm, pivoted hard, and executed a flawless, high-amplitude shoulder throw. The heavy enforcer sailed over Ange's back and slammed violently onto the concrete roof with a bone-shattering thud. The great angel mask groaned, attempting to lift its blade, but Ange was already moving. He stomped down hard, pinning his boot directly into the giant's chest and locking it to the ground. In one fluid motion, Ange unholstered his tactical pistol. He aimed straight down between the eyes of the smiling plastic mask. Bang! The single, suppressed headshot echoed across the rooftop. The great angel mask went entirely limp beneath his boot. Ange kept his weapon raised, his chest heaving slightly as he turned his cold, sharp gaze back toward a stunned Mamoru Aikawa. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. Mamoru Aikawa's smug smile instantly vanished. His jaw dropped in utter disbelief as he stared at the lifeless body of his ultimate enforcer. No human should have been able to overpower the great angel mask with raw physical strength, let alone a 16-year-old kid in a high school uniform. You monster, Aikawa stuttered, taking a panicked step backward toward the rooftop exit. What kind of training do you have? Ange didn't answer. He smoothly transitioned from his shooting stance, keeping his boot firmly planted on the dead enforcer's chest. He pivoted his upper body and snapped the tactical pistol forward, aiming it directly at the space between Aikawa's eyes. I told you, Ange said, his voice cold and completely devoid of fear. I don't take orders from people like you. Now, start talking. Who are you, and how do I get down from these buildings? Aikawa's eyes darted to the black barrel pointed at his face. A cold sweat broke out across his forehead. He knew he was completely outmatched in a close-quarters fight against Ange's speed. Slowly, Aikawa raised his hands in surrender, but a sinister, desperate grin began to creep back onto his face. You think killing me solves anything? Aikawa mocked, his voice trembling slightly. Go ahead, pull the trigger. But the moment my heartbeat stops, every single brainwashed mask in this sector will swarm this rooftop. You can't fight an army, kid. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. Before Aikawa could finish his threat, a sharp, supersonic crack ripped through the open air. Ange's martial arts reflex, honed by thousands of hours of reaction training, fired instantly. He snapped his head back a fraction of a second before the high-caliber sniper round tore through the space his skull had just occupied. The bullet grazed his cheek, leaving a thin, bright red line of blood, and sheared off a single strand of his dark brown hair. The strand drifted lazily into the wind. Time seemed to slow down. Ange's dark brown eyes locked onto the trajectory of the bullet, tracking its path in reverse across the sky. His gaze instantly found the target, a figure in a fedora holding a rifle on a skyscraper balcony over 300 yards away. Without a moment of hesitation, Ange raised his tactical pistol, calculated the drop, and fired back toward the flash. Bang! Across the gap between the buildings, Sniper Mask felt a sudden spike of danger. He scrambled to the side just as Ange's pistol round shattered the concrete railing right where his head had been. Sniper Mask rolled behind a pillar, his heart hammering against his ribs. A pistol shot from that distance? He thought in shock. Who is this kid? Taking advantage of the sudden chaos, Aikawa stumbled backward into the rooftop stairwell, fleeing into the safety of the lower floors. Ange didn't give chase. He wiped the drop of blood from his cheek with the back of his hand, his dark brown eyes narrowing as he scanned the neighboring roofs. The element of surprise was gone, and staying on this open rooftop was a death sentence. Ange smoothly reholstered his tactical pistol, turned on his heel, and sprinted down the opposite suspension bridge, disappearing into the concrete maze before another shot could be fired. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. Ange darted off the swaying suspension bridge and slipped through a broken window into the upper floors of a massive commercial high-rise. The indoor air was stale and heavy with dust. He checked his corners, moving silently through the empty hallways until he found an employee break room. He locked the heavy wooden door behind him and jammed a nearby metal chair under the handle for extra security. Walking over to the sink, Ange found a wall-mounted first aid kit. He opened it, pulling out a bottle of antiseptic disinfectant and a pack of standard bandages. He looked into the cracked mirror above the sink. His dark brown eyes were calm, but the shallow graze on his cheek was still stinging from the sniper bullet. Ange poured the cold disinfectant onto a piece of gauze and pressed it firmly against the cut. He winced slightly as the alcohol burned the wound, but his breathing remained steady. Once the bleeding stopped completely, he peeled open a Band-Aid and carefully pressed it over his cheek, covering the thin red line. He adjusted his dark brown hair, smoothed out the wrinkles in his second-year high school uniform, and checked his tactical holster. He was low on ammunition after his exchange with Sniper Mask and Aikawa, but his body was completely unharmed. "All right," Ange muttered to himself, gripping the handle of his pistol. "Time to find a way out of here." High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. The heavy wooden door of the break room shuddered. Bam! 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 Outside, a crowd of masked grunts pounded against the wood, their mindless groans echoing through the hallway. Ange spun around, backing away from the door as the frame began to splinter. He looked toward the room's massive glass window. Just 7 feet across the narrow alleyway stood a neighboring office tower. But there was a catch. Ange was on the 7th floor of his current building, and the window directly across from him on the other side was completely boarded up. The nearest open entry point was a dark, shattered window on the 6th floor of the opposite building, angling sharply downward. The break room door burst open, and 3 masks armed with pipes and iron bars lunged inside. With zero hesitation, Ange sprinted toward the glass, leaped onto the counter, and launched himself completely out of the window. He sailed across the open air, the wind rushing past his face as he plummeted toward the neighboring structure. Gravity took hold instantly. He cleared the 7th floor gap, crashing violently through the glass of the 6th floor window across the alley. Crash! Ange slammed hard against the rough concrete floor, tumbling through shards of glass and rolling across the dusty office space. The brutal impact sent a sharp shockwave through his ribs and legs, leaving him gasping for air. His martial arts break-fall technique saved his life, but the sheer force of dropping a full story down and landing on concrete severely bruised his shoulder, scraped his arms, and opened several small cuts through his uniform. "Ooh!" Ange groaned, gritting his teeth as he pushed himself up against a structural pillar. He crawled into a dark corner, hidden away from the shattered window line. Hissing in pain, he pulled his remaining first aid supplies out of his pockets. He checked his bones. Nothing was broken, but his shoulder was deeply bruised and his arms were bleeding from the fresh glass cuts. Working quickly and ignoring the sting, Ange tightly wrapped bandages around his forearms and secured a support wrap over his throbbing shoulder, bracing himself for whatever was coming next. Unbeknownst to Ange, this specific building was currently being used as a tactical base. Just a few floors above him, Yuri Honjo, her brother Rika, Mayuko niece, Sniper Mask, and Kuon Shinzaki, the girl who controls the terrifying railgun, were gathered around a map, completely unaware that a highly skilled 16-year-old had just crashed into their sector. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. Ignoring the dull throb in his bruised shoulder, Ange pushed himself off the concrete floor. He couldn't stay in this building. The sound of shattering glass had likely given away his position. He slipped past the dark office cubicles and found an exit leading out to a long, narrow suspension bridge that connected to a completely different skyscraper across the gap. Holding his side to protect his injured ribs, Ange stepped onto the wooden planks. The bridge swayed violently in the high-altitude wind, a sheer drop of thousands of feet yawning directly beneath him. Step by step, he forced his body to move quickly, his martial arts balance keeping him steady despite the dizzying height. As he reached the midway point of the bridge, a shadow fell over the far exit. Ange stopped in his tracks, his hand instinctively dropping to his tactical holster. Standing on the opposite rooftop, blocking his path forward, were two newly arrived masks. One held a long iron chain, and the other wielded a heavy combat axe. They stood side by side, their blank, smiling plastic faces staring directly at the lone, injured 16-year-old trapped on the middle of the bridge. Behind him, the building he had just left remained dead silent, though he knew he couldn't turn back. 1. Ange took a slow, deep breath, stabilizing his stance on the shifting wood. Even with his bandages and bruises, his dark brown eyes remained sharp and entirely focused. He was cornered over the abyss, and his only way out was straight through them. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. With the two masks closing in on the narrow bridge, Ange chose efficiency over flair. He didn't have the room to test his martial arts on a swaying rope bridge while carrying injuries. In one smooth, lightning-fast motion, he drew his tactical pistol from its holster. Bang! Bang! Too precise, successive shots cracked through the mountain wind. The first bullet hit the chain mask dead center between the eyes of its plastic mask. A split second later, the second round caught the axe mask right in the forehead. Both figures went limp instantly, tumbling over the low ropes of the suspension bridge and plummeting down into the endless sea of clouds below. Ange quickly re-holstered his weapon and crossed the rest of the bridge, stepping onto the rooftop of the new building. He immediately slipped inside the top floor to get out of the open line of sight. Searching through a security guard's desk near the roof access door, fortune finally favored him. Inside a locked drawer that he kicked open with a sharp martial arts strike, he found a black tactical pouch containing 3 fully loaded magazines that matched his pistol perfectly. He pocketed the extra ammo, feeling a wave of relief as his firepower was restored. Knowing he couldn't stay near a hot zone, Ange moved deeper into the skyscraper, descending several flights of stairs until he reached a deserted, luxury indoor shopping mall floor midway down the building. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. The eerie quiet of the abandoned indoor mall shattered instantly. A high-velocity rifle round ripped through the air, tearing through a clothing mannequin right next to Ange's head. Sniper Mask was perched on a glass balcony on the upper tier of the mall, his rifle already chambering another round. He had tracked the 16-year-old from the rooftops, determined to neutralize a threat that could shoot back across skyscrapers. Ange's martial arts reflexes exploded into action. He threw himself into a low, sliding dive across the polished marble floor just as a second bullet pulverized the tiles beneath his feet. Rolling behind the counter of a traditional Japanese specialty shop, his dark brown eyes scanned his surroundings for anything he could use. Resting on a display rack right beside him was an authentic, unsheathed katana, a high-end replica with a perfectly tempered steel blade. Up on the balcony, Sniper Mask lined up his scope on the edge of the counter, waiting for the kid to peek out. Instead, Ange leaped into the open air, the katana firmly gripped in both hands. Sniper Mask pulled the trigger. With impossible, supernatural martial arts speed, Ange swung the katana in a blinding arc. The hardened steel blade met the supersonic bullet dead-on in mid-air. A loud clang echoed through the atrium as the sword reflected the bullet, sending it rocketing right back up toward the upper balcony. Sniper Mask's eyes widened behind his plastic face. His own instincts saved him. He threw his torso backward just in time. The deflected bullet whizzed past his shoulder and hit the concrete wall behind him with a loud crunch, showering his fedora in dust. Ange landed flawlessly on his feet 2 floors below, the katana held in a perfect defensive stance, his dark brown eyes locked onto the stunned sniper above. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, continued. The tension in the shopping mall atrium was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ange kept his katana raised, his dark brown eyes locked onto Sniper Mask, who slowly stood up from behind the balcony railing, his rifle still ready but his posture hesitant. Before either of them could make another move, rapid footsteps echoed from the upper concourse. Running out onto the level near Sniper Mask was a young girl with bright blonde hair, clad in a school uniform and carrying a lethal combat knife. It was Mayuko Nice, affectionately called Misa by Yuri, the fierce fighter who had become Yuri's closest ally and protector. Ange tightened his grip on the katana, his martial arts instincts telling him this blonde girl was a highly trained, lethal combatant. Sniper Mask turned his head slightly as she approached. "Misa, what are you doing down here? Is Yuri safe?" Misa stopped next to the railing, her sharp eyes scanning the shattered tiles below before locking onto Ange. Yuri heard the gunfire and the sword strike from across the way. She sent me to make sure you weren't pinned down. Who is that kid? I don't know, Sniper Mask replied, keeping his eyes on the ground floor. He's just a 16-year-old in a high school uniform, but he just deflected my rifle round with that sword. He's dangerous, but he doesn't seem to be working for Aikawa. As the two of them focused entirely on each other, discussing the bizarre situation, Ange saw his window. He didn't care about their alliance or who Yuri was, he just needed to survive. Utilizing the perfect audio diversion, Ange didn't make a sound. He lowered the katana, shifted his weight, and melted back into the deep shadows of the storefronts. Moving with the silent, ghost-like footwork of a master martial artist, he slipped through a rear service exit and vanished into the labyrinth of the skyscraper's lower levels before Sniper Mask or Misa could even turn around to check the empty floor. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 1, A New Horizon, Ending. Ange didn't look back as he pushed through the heavy metal exit doors. The voices of Misa and Sniper Mask faded entirely, swallowed up by the vast layout of the abandoned skyscraper. He slipped down a dark utility staircase, his movements completely silent, ensuring no one from the Alliance could track his location. Reaching a lower sky bridge on a completely different side of the building, Ange stepped back out into the open air. The high-altitude wind caught his dark brown hair, fluttering the edges of the fresh Band-Aid on his cheek. Below him, the endless blanket of white cloud shifted lazily, hiding whatever lay at the bottom of this nightmare world. He paused for a single moment to adjust the tactical holster at his hip. His shoulder still throbbed from his 7-foot leap through the window, and his forearms were tightly bound in white medical tape, but his grip on his tactical pistol was rock solid. He had survived his first hour in this realm, killed a god candidate's strongest enforcer, and deflected a sniper round with a katana. Ange turned his sharp, dark brown eyes toward the sprawling horizon of infinite skyscrapers. He didn't care about their factions, their masks, or their gods. He was going to find a way home, and anyone who stood in his way would learn exactly what a 16-year-old martial artist could do. With a determined stride, Ange walked across the bridge and vanished into the next sector, leaving the Alliance behind. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath. Yuri Honjo had been tracking the rumors of a high schooler who took down the Great Angel Mask with bare hands. When she finally spotted Ange crossing a wide, glass-domed garden terrace connecting two high rises, she stepped out to confront him, her trusty rifle slung over her shoulder. Hey! Wait up! I just want to talk. Ange didn't give her a second to breathe. To Yuri, the world usually moved in slow motion when her god candidate abilities flared, allowing her to react to bullets and dodge impossible strikes. But the moment Ange exploded forward, his raw, ungodly martial arts speed shattered her perception. He closed the distance so fast that her slow-motion vision felt like completely normal time. Before she could even raise her hands to defend herself, Ange was already in her guard. He put his hands up, unleashing a blinding flurry of close-quarters strikes. Yuri desperately tried to track his movements, but his fists were a blur of dark uniform fabric and bandaged forearms. A razor-sharp left jab grazed her chin, followed instantly by a lightning-fast body blow that forced her to step back, her breath catching in her throat. Ange kept the pressure entirely suffocating. He didn't use his pistol. He relied solely on lethal, high-speed combinations, pushing Yuri across the glass terrace. Every time she tried to create space or draw a weapon, a snapping kick or a heavy palm strike intercepted her momentum, keeping her entirely on the defensive against an opponent who refused to let up for even a fraction of a second. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Yuri's back hit the reinforced glass railing of the terrace. She was completely out of breath, her vision barely keeping up with the relentless onslaught of Ange's fists. But just as she braced herself for a final, crushing blow, the suffocating pressure vanished. Ange stopped his fist mere millimeters from her nose. His knuckles, tightly wrapped in white medical tape, hovered perfectly still. His dark brown eyes locked onto hers for a fraction of a second, analyzing her posture, her fear, and the fact that she hadn't once tried to kill him with malicious intent. "You're too slow," Ange said coldly. Before Yuri could even process the words or catch her breath, Ange dropped his stance and spun on his heel. He didn't give her a chance to reply, call for backup, or ask questions. With the same fast-as-hell speed he used to attack, he sprinted across the remaining stretch of the glass terrace, leapt over a low concrete barrier, and disappeared down a fire escape into the next building. Yuri slid down against the glass railing, gasping for air, her heart pounding violently against her ribs. She looked at the empty terrace where the 16-year-old had just been standing. Her slow-motion ability had done absolutely nothing to help her. What kind of human is he? She whispered to herself, rubbing her aching arms. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Yuri slid down the smooth glass railing until her knees hit the concrete terrace. Her lungs burned as she dragged in heavy breaths of the cold, high-altitude air. Her hands were trembling slightly as she clutched her rifle, her knuckles white. What just happened? She thought, her mind racing to process the last 60 seconds. Ever since she had tapped into her God-candidate abilities, the world usually moved at a crawl whenever danger neared. She could see the trajectory of bullets, anticipate a mask swing, and react before anyone else could even blink. But against that kid, her perception of time hadn't given her an edge at all. His raw, overwhelming speed had completely neutralized her slow-motion vision, forcing it to feel like regular, terrifyingly fast time. Footsteps clattered against the stone as Mayuko Nice and Sniper Mask came rushing out onto the terrace from the adjacent building, their weapons drawn and faces tense. Yuri! Mayuko cried out, instantly dropping to her knees beside her blue eyes wide with panic. Are you okay? We heard the impact from inside. Did that kid do this to you? Sniper Mask raised his rifle, his plastic face scanning the empty glass walkways and upper balconies. Where is he? I can take the shot if he's still in range. No, don't, Yuri gasped out, finally catching her breath and waving a hand to stop them. She let Mayuko help her to her feet, wiping a layer of sweat from her forehead. He's already gone. He moved so fast, guys. I couldn't even get a single shot off. He didn't even use a weapon. Mayuko looked down at the scuff marks on the terrace floor, her grip tightening on her combat knife. He beat a god candidate with bare hands. He didn't just beat me, Yuri murmured, looking toward the dark fire escape where Ange had vanished. He spared me. He stopped his fist right before it hit my face, called me slow, and just walked away. We need to be careful. If Aikawa gets to that kid before we do, this whole world is over. 1. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Yuri leaned heavily against Mayuko's shoulder, her legs still feeling like lead. She looked down at her own hands, forcing them to stop shaking. The sheer speed of that 16-year-old had completely shattered her confidence in her god-candidate abilities. We need to get back to the base, Yuri said, her voice dropping to a serious, determined whisper. Right now. Sniper Mask nodded silently, keeping his rifle raised in a tight guard as he escorted Yuri and Mayuko back across the suspension bridge. The wind howled through the wires, but Yuri barely heard it. Her mind was trapped in a loop, replaying the blur of Ange's bandaged fists breaking through her defense over and over again. Back inside their tactical room on the upper floor of the neighboring skyscraper, the rest of the Alliance was waiting. Rika Honjo and Kuon Shinzaki looked up from their maps the moment the door swung open. Kuon immediately noticed the pale look on Yuri's face. Yuri, what happened out there? Kuon asked, stepping forward, her hand instinctively reaching toward her railgun controller. My detection network. I felt a massive spike of energy on that terrace, but it disappeared instantly. Was it an enforcer mask? No, Yuri said, sinking into an office chair and placing her rifle on the desk. It was a human. A kid in a second-year high school uniform named Ange. He's the one who killed the great Angel Mask. Rika frowned, crossing his arms. A high schooler did that? How? Did he have a powerful weapon? That's the terrifying part, Rika, Yuri replied, looking her brother dead in the eyes. He didn't use a gun or a mask. He used martial arts. When he attacked me, my slow-motion vision couldn't keep up. It felt like normal time. If he wanted me dead, I wouldn't be sitting in this chair right now. A heavy, suffocating silence fell over the room. Mayuko gripped the handle of a knife, her expression darkening, while Sniper Mask leaned against the wall, adjusting his fedora. If this Ange is that strong and refuses to join us, Rika muttered, staring at the sector map, we have a massive wild card on our hands. But if Aikawa figures out a way to control him or brainwash him with a mask, none of us are making it out of this world alive. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, no breath, continued. Yuri stared down at the polished wood of the conference table, her reflection looking pale and exhausted. The weight of being a god candidate suddenly felt twice as heavy. She could still feel the phantom rush of wind against her face from Ange's final punch. We can't hunt him down, Yuri said firmly, breaking the tense silence in the room. Mayuko blinked, looking surprised. But Yuri, if he's that dangerous and roaming free. Think about it, Misa, Yuri interrupted gently, looking up at her blonde friend. If we chase him, he's going to think we're just like the masks. He's 16. He's a high school kid who just got violently dragged into this nightmare, probably terrified out of his mind, even if he doesn't show it. Every time someone approaches him, they try to kill him. If we corner him, he'll fight to the death. And honestly, I don't think we can beat him without someone getting seriously hurt. Sniper Mask shifted his weight against the wall, his arms crossed over his chest. She's right, his modulated voice chimed in. His reaction time is supernatural. He tracked my bullet path and returned fire precisely enough to graze me from hundreds of yards away with a handgun. A direct confrontation is a tactical mistake. Kuan Shinzaki stepped closer to Yuri, her eyes filled with concern. So what do? We can't just ignore him. If Aikawa finds him while he's isolated. We don't ignore him. We watch over him from a distance, Yuri explained, a spark of her usual determination returning to her eyes. She stood up and pointed to a section of the map. Kuan, use your network. Don't track him closely enough for him to notice. Just keep a broad eye on his sector. If Aikawa sends an army of masks his way, we move in to back him up. We show him we're on his side through our actions, not by forcing him into a corner. Rika looked at his sister and smiled faintly, nodding in agreement. It's a gamble, Yuri. But it's better than turning a potential ally into our worst enemy. Yuri walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over the dizzying maze of suspension bridges and grey concrete towers. Somewhere out there, a dark-haired kid with a band-aid on his cheek was fighting for his life, completely alone. Hang in there, Ange, Yuri thought, clutching her rifle tightly. We're going to show you that you aren't the only human left fighting in this world. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Yuri's eyes remained fixed on the horizon, watching the shadows of the skyscrapers lengthen as the sun began its slow descent. The endless expanse of concrete towers felt more suffocating than ever. Suddenly, a sharp gasp from Kuan shattered the quiet of the room. Yuri spun around instantly. Kuan was clutching her head, her hand trembling against the railgun controller. Her eyes were wide with sudden panic. Yuri, my detection network. The sector Ange just entered. It's completely lighting up. Is it Aikawa? Yuri asked, rushing back over to the map table, her pulse instantly spiking. It's a massive deployment, Kuan stammered, her voice shaking as she pointed to a cluster of 4 high-rise buildings just 2 blocks away from their position. Dozens of signals are converging on his location. But it's not just mindless grunts. There are multiple high-tier masks moving in a coordinated grid formation. They are actively hunting him. Mayuko stepped up, her blonde hair swaying as she gripped her combat knife. Aikawa must have realized how much of a threat that kid is to his god candidate status. He's trying to eliminate him before Ange can disrupt his plans any further. Yuri looked at the map, then at her team. The memory of Ange's suffocating speed flashed through her mind, but no matter how fast he was, an entire army of specialized masks closing in on an injured 16-year-old was a death sentence. Her protective instincts, the very core of why she fought in this world, completely took over. Change of plans, Yuri said, her voice dropping all traces of hesitation as she racked the bolt of her rifle. We aren't just watching him anymore. If Aikawa wants to throw an entire army at a high school kid, he's going to have to go through us first. She looked directly at Sniper Mask and Mayuko. Misa, Sniper, pack up. We are moving out to reinforce him right now. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Through the scope of a rifle from a neighboring rooftop, Yuri's breath hitched in her throat. She had brought her team to reinforce him, but Ange was already turning the war zone into a display of absolute martial perfection. The coordinated grid of masks had him cornered on a wide concrete terrace. 10 masked grunts armed with spears and pipes rushed him in a tight, single-file line. Ange didn't panic. He stood perfectly still until the very last second, letting them line up perfectly. In a flash of dark fabric, he drew his tactical pistol. Bang! 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 He fired exactly 3 bullets. Utilizing the high-caliber armor-piercing rounds he had scavenged, the shots ripped through the air in perfect alignment. The bullets tore straight through the skull of the first mask, continuing their trajectory to strike the second, third, and fourth. By the third echoing crack, a brutal collateral chain reaction had left all 10 masks dead on the pavement before they could even swing a weapon. Did he just line them up on purpose? Mayuko whispered from behind Yuri, her blue eyes wide with disbelief. The rest of the horde, nearly 20 more masks, surged forward over the bodies. Ange smoothly holstered his pistol and unsheathed the steel katana he had kept from them all. Moving with blinding, high-speed footwork, he became a whirlwind of steel. He didn't just slash, his martial arts precision targeted their center mass. With clean, terrifyingly powerful strokes, he literally cut the charging masks in half, the blade moving so fast the air hissed around him. But Ange was smart. He looked at the endless wave of reinforcement signals still pouring into the sector. He muttered to himself, "I'm not fighting an army today." With a sudden burst of speed, he sprinted toward the edge of the skyscraper. He didn't look back. With a massive, explosive leap, Ange launched himself over the terrifying void, soaring across the wide gap toward a lower, nearby rooftop. Yuri tracked him through her sights as he descended. He slammed onto the gravel of the new roof, instantly absorbing the brutal impact with a flawless martial arts shoulder roll. He transitioned smoothly from the roll straight back onto his feet without losing a single ounce of momentum. Without pausing to check behind him, Ange sprinted into the shadows of the new building's utility structures, vanishing from sight once again. Yuri slowly lowered her rifle, looking over at Sniper Mask and Mayuko. The rescue mission was over before it even started. The kid didn't need saving. He was entirely capable of defying the rules of this world all on his own. High-Rise Invasion, Season 2, Episode 2, No Breath, continued. Yuri slowly lowered her rifle, the cold metal of the barrel pressing against her palm. She stared at the empty gravel rooftop across the gap where Ange had just landed, rolled, and sprinted out of sight. The silence that followed his departure was heavy, broken only by the distant whistling of the high-altitude wind. Beside her, Mayuko let out a long breath she seemed to have been holding for a full minute. 3 bullets. 10 masks. He didn't just survive an ambush, Yuri. He treated a coordinated army like an annoying speed bump. And he knew when to pull out, Sniper Mask added, his modulated voice dripping with rare, genuine respect. He lowered his sniper rifle, resting it against his shoulder. He realized the tactical disadvantage of staying in an open grid. That jump required flawless kinetic precision. A single inch short, and he would be a stain on the clouds below. Yuri didn't say a word at first. She walked right up to the concrete ledge, looking down at the severed plastic masks and empty shell casings littering the terrace where Ange had stood just moments ago. Her heart was still hammering, not out of fear for herself, but out of absolute awe. Every other human dragged into this world either panicked, committed suicide, or slowly lost their minds trying to hide from the masks. Even she and Mayuko had to fight tooth and nail, relying on luck and heavy weapons just to clear a single building in the beginning. But Ange was changing the entire nature of the game. He wasn't playing by the rules of survival, he was dictating them. "Yuri?" Mayuko asked, stepping up beside her and placing a hand on her shoulder. "What's the play?" Kuon says the remaining masks in the grid are scattering. They lost their target. Yuri turned back to her team, a sharp, confident smile finally breaking through her stunned expression. The fear she felt during her own brief clash with Ange was completely gone, replaced by a profound sense of hope. "The play doesn't change," Yuri said, her voice ringing with absolute certainty. "He doesn't want to fight an army today, which means he's looking for a safe place to lay low and recover from that jump. We don't chase him, and we don't crowd him. But we are going to make sure Aikawa never gets a clean shot at him again. If that kid wants to be a lone wolf, fine. We'll just be the pack that guards his perimeter." She looked over at Sniper Mask. "Sir, can you keep an eye on that specific lower sector from the high towers? Just let us know if any more high-tier masks start converging on his trail." "Consider it done," Sniper Mask replied, adjusting his fedora before turning to find a higher vantage point. Yuri clutched her rifle tightly, looking back toward the dark structure where the dark-haired high schooler had vanished. "You're not alone out here, Angie," she thought. "Whether you like it or not, we've got your back."